Okay, in this video we're going to look at some of the impacts that globalisation can have on the Australian economy. So what are some of the positives, what are some of the negatives, what are some of the industries that have suffered as a result of globalisation? So firstly, looking at inflation, and in terms of the impact globalisation has on inflation, it is all positive. It's all led to lower inflation, it's all led to lower prices in Australia. And there's a range of reasons for that. The first being that, first of all, if we're removing tariffs on overseas goods and services, then it's reducing the price of those imports, and therefore it's allowing for lower prices and increased purchasing power for consumers. So by reducing tariffs, it lowers the price of imports, and those imports are often used in production, but they're also just directly brought by Australians, so they will directly reduce the CPI as well, because we will be buying less, we're paying less for imports that we just buy on a regular basis as consumers. The other reasons why globalisation is good for inflation is it gives us access to cheaper capital and machinery, so businesses can use that capital and machinery to lower their production costs because they make them more productive, so that investment makes the business more productive. So globalisation has kept inflation below 3% for the last 20 years, whereas in the 80s and 90s inflation was around 9%, so prices were going up on average around 9% per year. But because of all of these impacts of globalisation, inflation has significantly reduced. Other reasons why it will lead to lower inflation is there's more competition within markets, so firms are forced to become more efficient because of the result of increased competition, and that can help to keep wage pressures down because a part of globalisation is immigration. So not only is there competition from foreign firms because there's cheaper imports, but it also leads to decreased wage pressures because immigration means there's more competition for jobs. People have to work harder and firms can afford to pay them less. Other features of globalisation include like enterprise bargaining and performance-based pay, which is associated with deregulation. So they have worked to make people work more productively and lower firms' costs of production as well. And the other part of globalisation is that it's all based on specialisation. Firms specialise in doing what they're good at. That makes them more efficient. That leads to lower costs of production for businesses as well, because they're specialising in areas of comparative advantage. So there's a lot of reasons why globalisation helps inflation, and it's important that if you get asked that question, that you have a very broad answer to that question, talking about the lower prices from lower tariffs, the fact there's more competition, the fact that they've promoted enterprise bargaining and performance-based pay. All of these are really key reasons why globalisation has led to less inflation. Strong and sustainable growth is not as straightforward. There are positives and negatives for our growth rates. So when we're talking about Australia's growth rates, we're talking about our level of production. Are we producing more, or are we likely to be producing less after globalisation? So in terms of the benefits, globalisation encourages us to shift resources to comparative advantage, so that makes us more efficient. So it increases our labour productivity because we're specialising in areas that we're good at, and therefore that's leading to increased output per unit of input. The first reason is we specialise in areas of comparative advantage that makes us more productive. Secondly, globalisation has led to increased export sales from overseas because there's lower tariffs on our exports. That's a component of aggregate demand and leads to increased production as well. Globalisation allows us access to new equipment and new embedded access to technology, which we can use to become more productive as well and generate a greater level of output. So that access to new equipment and technology is another positive. It reduces the protection for businesses, so they have to work more efficiently as well. It encourages foreign investment, so foreign investment can be used. We can use foreign capital and money to try and boost our productive capacity, and that makes us more productive going forward. So that's a really important element of trying to make our economy more efficient going forward. Another reason it helps to boost economic growth is it helps to lower company taxes. So because of the competition and the globalisation, there's a lot of pressure on firms to reduce their company tax rates because of that idea that they need to become more efficient and be able to compete with other companies. So the lower company tax rate is another benefit for our growth. So lower company tax rates, increased foreign investment, increased access to equipment and technology, lower tariffs encouraging our exports, and that idea of specialising in areas of comparative advantage are all benefits for strong and sustainable growth. In terms of weaknesses, the main weaknesses is we're more susceptible to overseas growth rates. So, if there is a recession in Japan or the United States, like we saw with the GFC, we're susceptible to that because we rely on them for a lot of our exports. So if the GFC, for example, caused less demand for exports and therefore people in Australia lost jobs, shareholders also had money invested in foreign companies, so they are susceptible to to slower rates overseas, because if companies go broke, then shareholders will lose money and their wealth will depreciate or decrease as well. So some local firms have had to shut down because of high labour costs, so that can lead to more unemployment. So when local labour firms can't compete, that's led to a lot of unemployment, particularly in manufacturing industries and textiles. And unemployment is bad for our gross domestic product because people are faced with lower incomes, lower GDP per capita, and that leads to less spending and less growth in the economy as well. Thank you.